Hello lovely lot, my name is Max, welcome back to my YouTube channel and another Nottingham Forest match preview where today we are discussing our upcoming home match on Sunday taking on Leeds United. If you're new around these parts, these videos go as follows. We start by giving some discussion and context to our opposition season thus far. We then start talking about their stats and their key players in a little bit more detail. We then talk about their tactics and what we can actually expect on the pitch from them, followed by an overall score line prediction. So if you enjoy this kind of stuff, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. With that being said, let's start talking about Jesse Marsch and Leeds United. So as we usually do, we're going to start by providing some context to the season thus far for Leeds United. And I've got to say now is probably the best time for us to be playing them. They are without a win in their last 5 matches, just 2 points picked up from their 5 games. And it's the latest chapter in what has been a very crazy last 3 or 4 years for Leeds United, obviously coming up, romping to the Championship title under Marcelo Bielsa, having a really solid first season. Second season, wheels came off a little bit. They brought in Jesse Marsch as Bielsa's replacement. They avoided relegation on the last day by like 3 points, even though the underlying numbers would suggest they were probably a mid-table side last season. And this season, they're more or less where they were last season, in that sort of 15th to 17th position place in the Premier League. And they've definitely gone out and spent big over the last 2 transfer windows, which is very rich for a Forest fan to say. I understand that, having filled the void left by the £100 million sales of both Rafinha and Calvin Phillips to Barcelona and Manchester City, respectively. Some of the players that they've reinvested into this team include Tyler Adams, Mark Roca, Rasmus Christensen, Luis Sinisterra, Wilfried Noto, and Maximilian Voba from RB Salzburg. And I think they've done a really good job of filling the void left by their 2 best players over the course of the last 2 seasons. And I think they've built a very solid Premier League standard team. That being said, Leeds sit currently 15th in the Premier League, just 2 places and 3 points behind us at the time of recording. And it definitely feels like this is, as most games are at the moment, a crucial 3 points in order to really put some distance between ourselves and the relegation zone and Leeds United, who are a team in and around the same sort of level of us at the moment. So now I've given you some context, I kind of want to start diverting into the stats in a little bit more detail, talking about what has made Leeds tick so far this season. And as you would expect, their attacking side of their game is probably where they are the strongest. They currently sit 11th in the Premier League for both goals scored and expected goals generated, and their 12.5 shots per 90 minutes are only beaten by 8 other Premier League sides. They are most definitely a very solid attacking side, one of the best in the league in terms of that mid-table pack at the moment. Yeah, when you look at their underlying numbers in terms of the attacking stuff, there's nothing to worry about. They're very solid in front of goal, get loads of goals, very good in terms of the attacking players that they have. It's defensively where there's probably the biggest issues. Leeds concede around 13 shots per 90 minutes, which is actually fairly decent. Again, it puts them more or less mid-table. It's in the more quantifiable numbers, the more tangible numbers, where Leeds are struggling at the most in terms of goals scored and expected goals against. They are definitely within that bottom sort of 4 or 5 teams of the Premier League at the moment. They don't necessarily concede lots of shots, but when they do, they concede quite high volume and high quality opportunities. And if we're being honest, probably their most valuable asset, Ilya Millier, is having a pretty poor season by his standards. If we're looking at his underlying numbers, his save percentage is the lowest of his Leeds United career thus far, around 66% save percentage. But we've seen that he can play at a very high Premier League standard. During that first season under Bielsa, it was around 77%. So he's definitely batting below average in terms of his standards in the Premier League, and I'd imagine he'll bounce back. But he's definitely having a poor season by his standards. And when we look at those numbers in a little bit more detail, his post-shot expected goals is actually the second worst in the Premier League of goalkeepers to have played substantial minutes in the Premier League this season. Only Gavin Bazunu from Southampton actually worses or bests, I guess, that metric so far this season. And like Bazunu, we were talking about him a couple of weeks ago for Southampton, he's a very young goalkeeper, and I think it's very harsh to be too critical on him because, of course, he's got a long time to improve. He's probably 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years off his actual peak as a goalkeeper. He's got a lot to learn, but maybe it was worth bringing in another goalkeeper in the January window just to take him out the firing line a little bit, because I don't think in terms of shot stopping he's been that great this season. On the ball he's fantastic, commanding his box, he's a great modern goalkeeper. His shot stopping though does leave a little bit to be desired. And on the subject of key players, I actually think that Rodrigo is going to be a huge miss for Leeds United. Not very controversial to say. He scored 10 of the 26 goals that Leeds have scored in the Premier League so far this season, whilst taking the most shots and generating the 5th most chances for Leeds in the Premier League this season. Whilst he's been quite hot and cold since joining from Spain, I would imagine his missing through injury is probably going to be one of the biggest misses for Leeds this season. He's been so important for the goals that they score. In terms of other key players, I think Weston McKennie is maybe the one that people will be talking about in the second half of the season. He seems to be a very popular signing for Leeds United. I'm personally not the biggest fan of him. I don't think he's been particularly great at Juventus. His numbers certainly don't suggest that he's a top level player. But what I will say is that Leeds are very stacked in that midfield. I'm a big fan of Tyler Adams and Mark Roca in that midfield. They are the two players who've completed the first and third most tackles in that squad respectively in the Premier League this season, and Roca is in the top 15% of midfielders in Europe for progressive passes, whilst if you look at the defensive numbers from Tyler Adams, he is consistently in the top sort of 10, 15, 20% of midfielders in Europe for pretty much all defensive actions over the course of the last 365 days. They have a really solid midfield pairing, and it looks like Adams might be missing out through a knock for this game. It's sort of hit and miss whether he actually features or not, and if he doesn't play, that's going to be a huge let-off for us, because I'm a massive fan of Tyler Adams. I think he's really gone under the radar as one of the better signings in the Premier League this season. With that being said though, I want to start moving into the tactics, get this video moving on a little bit. We can go for quite a while, so we're going to start talking about the tactics, like I say, and talking about what we can expect on the field on the day from this Leeds United side. So on the board, we've got Leeds United here in the white. Their shape on the ball looks something like a 4-2-3-1 shape, where they look to get their attacking wide players into central positions, and the width comes from the fullbacks. And off the ball looks something closer to a 4-2-2-2, a 4-4-2, where they've got the number 10 going and joining the striker to create that mid-block. And it's a very common off-the-ball shape for a lot of modern coaches. The idea is that they want to be playing out from the back with their defenders and looking to congest the central areas. Like I say, their wide players come inside and look more like wide number 10s, looking to congest the central areas with the width when they are on the ball coming from the fullbacks. Their defenders are actually all quite good on the ball in terms of breaking the lines and looking to get the ball forward. They definitely look to get the ball into the midfield as quickly as possible, into the forward players, looking to move across the press of the opposition to create that passing opportunity. The wide players who then come inside look to flick the ball off and quickly start attacking phases for Leeds United. I think from what I've seen, at least, there seems to be an emphasis of building out and getting from back to front as quickly as possible, whilst not necessarily being a long ball team. They're definitely a team that look to build through the phases as quickly as possible, build through the thirds of the pitch as quickly as possible, and they definitely use the passing ability of all their players to quickly create passing opportunities and sort of play through teams and their presses as quickly as possible. Off the ball, Leeds are definitely not as gung-ho as they were under Marcelo Bielsa. They're not as aggressive in a man-oriented press like they were under the Argentine. Their shape off the ball looks something closer to a 4-4-2, like I was saying. Could also interpret it as a 4-2-2-2. The wide players can definitely come into more central areas to congest the centre of the pitch. The idea being that the number 10 comes up alongside the striker in order to kind of cover a sort of shadow of this guy, the number 6, the pivot player in the opposition team. It sort of prevents the ball from being played through the lines because they'll make that covering run to prevent it. Instead, what it'll do, if I get rid of the text on screen, is force the opposition team into playing the ball into wider areas, and this is one of the most common press triggers for this Leeds United team. Instead of being man orientated and aggressively looking to win the ball back proactively, they will look for press triggers in which they will then look to hunt the ball down when the ball goes into certain places or is played to certain players. An example of this, like I say, is when the ball goes into the wide area. You'll see Bamford or Rodrigo, whoever is playing up front, go alongside the defender of the opposite team. You might see Harrison coming alongside the midfielder, the number 10 shifting over. Generally, they'll sort of shift over to the side of the pitch that the ball's on, the ball side of the pitch. And this then obviously creates very few passing opportunities. He can't get into his mate in the pivot, can't play the ball back to here, might force the ball back to the goalkeeper, has to go long. Generally, the idea is to cut off the pitch as much as possible to isolate the ball player. Obviously, you've got the touchline down here that basically cuts off 180 degrees, 270 degrees of the pitch for the player on the ball, and it forces them into taking gambles, into risking possession, into playing the ball maybe into the channel where they've not got the mobility in their forward players to do so. And it's actually quite a common but very clever way of forcing the ball into wide areas, isolating the defender, and basically cutting off any passing lanes for the opposition. Like I said, I don't think they do anything particularly unique off the ball, certainly in terms of modern pressing teams. They're always looking to isolate the oppositions. It's very common that teams will use the touchline as almost like an extra man in their press, as it cuts off, like I say, 180, 270 degrees of the pitch instead of giving them that full range if you are allowing the ball to be played through central areas into the pivot and into the attack. And I think it's going to be really important for Forest in general to build as quickly as possible, to not allow Leeds to set their traps, to get into the positions to prevent teams from playing out from the back. It might also be worth us playing a double pivot in this team, whether that's Froyland, Danilo. I don't think Shelvey's going to be fit, maybe Yates if he can come back soon. It's going to be a case of adding as much depth in that midfield, maybe playing a double pivot and maybe looking to add extra numbers in deep positions so we can then build through back to front as quickly as possible and get the ball into our attacking players. So in terms of a scoreline for this match, I've been and ahhing between whether we're going to pick up a point or 3 points. I do think we'll pick up something from this game. I think Leeds' injuries have left them so susceptible against teams who can play through them quite quickly, and I think hopefully we can do that. I'm going to go for a 2-1 scoreline. I do think we'll pick up the win, obviously. A 2-1 scoreline. I think the home field advantage is going to be a huge factor in us picking up the 3 points. And like I say, I think the injuries have ravaged their team and left them in a position that could make them quite susceptible to being picked off. Of course, though, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, your scoreline predictions for Nottingham Forest versus Leeds United on Sunday afternoon. And whilst you're down there, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. With that being said, I will catch you later.